Let's see how to enter the data into a new file. The first thing that we normally would be defining is the codes for the participant. So let's call it just participant code. Right. So it's going to be a numeric value. So this is by default correct, at least in this case, and the type of measure, it will be nominal, although it's going to be numbers. Basically, these numbers have no value of amount. So being participant number 12 doesn't mean anything higher than being participant number 5. So basically, these numbers are completely arbitrary. So let's leave it as nominal. The second variable that we will be defining is the independent variable. So in this case, it's going to be gaze direction, and it will have 4 different numeric values. So we have to define these values. This is quite important because otherwise, when we get access to these data in the future, we might not remember what these values meant. So 1 is going to be looking at the left. So 2 is going to be, let's say, center. 3 is going to be right. And finally, 4 will be closed eyes, because it's something that it was also considered in the study. So we have 4 different values now, 1, 2, 3, 4. They are numerical values, but when we run the analysis, it will always be shown to us as left, center, right, or closed eyes. Okay. And finally, we have to define 2 versions of the dependent variable. The first one is going to be the dependent variable measured after 1 week. 1 week. And of course, it's going to be numerical as well. And we know that it's going to range between 1 and 24. And it has to be a scale, so we have to select scale. Sorry, I forgot to select the measure for gaze direction. It can be nominal, it can be ordinal, or it can be scale, but I think it's easier to define it as nominal, because this way we know that it doesn't have any amount. So having a 4 or a 3 is not anything bigger than a 2 or a 1. So let's leave it as nominal, because it makes more sense, basically. And finally, a fourth the variable, it will be the second condition of the dependent of the time factor. So it will be measures 6 months after the participants watched the video. And again, it has to be assigned the level of measure of a scale. So it's going to be a continuous variable. Right. So now we have all 4 columns that we have to fill in with data. So we now can go to the data view tab and we can start to type the data here. So first we have 12 participants, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 participants. So I'm going to assign them these arbitrary numbers, 1 per participant. So now I know that this one makes reference to participant number 1. Let's assume that these participants were assigned to the looking at the left condition. So they were watching lineups of suspects looking at the left of the screen. So I'm going to type 1 in all these cells, indicating that they were being assigned to that condition. Now, all participants in the study take part in the time condition. So that's why we have two columns for all of them. Regardless of the participants, we always going to have two different measures. One is 1 week after they watched the video, and the other one is 6 months after they watched the video. So let's say that participant 1 reminded or correctly detected the suspect that they had watched in the video in 13 out of 24 cases. But 6 months later, this person only did it correctly 8 times. And the second participant, let's say that got 15 correct suspects in 1 week after they watched the video, and then the same participant got, let's say, 10. This is completely made up, of course, but we will be entering here the real data, the data that we had collected after running the study. Right, so so this is basically the way that we are going to be entering the data. So because these participants are going to be taking part in 2 or more conditions of the variable, we will need to fill the same numbers again. So let's say that participant 1 not only was watching the lineup with people looking at red, but this one, participant 1, was also assigned to the closed eyes condition. So he had to find out the suspect when the lineup was looking at the left, but also when the suspects of the lineup were closing their eyes. And in this case, let's say that he was able to find out the suspect 18 times, so more in this case, after 1 week, and then after 6 months, he's had something like 13 correct suspects. And we would be doing the same for the second participant, condition 4, so closed eyes, and something like, let's say, 16 and 12. Okay, and we will be doing the same. We're going to have 24 participants, so maybe down here we will have something like participant 21, and let's say that this one was being assigned to looking at the right, and again, I don't know, 15 and 10, and then let's see that he or she is also being assigned to closed eyes, so let's say 12 and 16. So this is going to be the way that we enter the data in SPSS. So the main thing to bear in mind is that we have columns that we use to assign the values of the independent variable, but also when we have a repeated measures design, we are going to enter the data for the different levels of these repeated measures factor in 2 different columns. So one column for the first measure and another column for the second measure. And we know that these measures are for the same participant because basically they are in the same row. And we know that rows are cases, rows are participants.